Hello, friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Before we take you to your favorite Sports History Network show, just want to tell you a little bit about some merch that you can pick up that represents your favorite SHN podcast. So far, there's t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even books from some of the authors that do podcasts right here on SHN. Who could buy something better than that than have the history right from the gentleman that you hear talking about it? But we also are adding things each and every day. And where's that store, may you ask? Well, it's at SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Up at the top, there is the SHN merch button. Click on that. It'll take you right to the store, and you can be representing your favorite podcast and show the world that, hey, on the swag that I'm using, it's the headquarters of sports yesteryear, Sports History Network, and my favorite podcaster, the Sports History Network store. Shop there today.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Welcome to the Football History Dude Podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. Your host is Arnie Chapman. Football is his passion, and he wants you to come along with him to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board his DeLorean, and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
Great Scott!
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today we're going to discuss part one of the all-time greatest offensive players. Joining me today will be my friends Arnie Chapman and Dave DiPaolo. May you want to start with the 1999 list again?
Go ahead, Mark. Yeah, that'll be good. Yep.
All right. We'll
do the offense. Yep.
We'll start with, how about we start with wide receiver?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, they've got a lot of the same names. Jerry Rice, Don Hudson,
Yep.
Lance Allworth, Raymond Berry, Steve Largent, Paul Warfield, Charlie Taylor. They got Crazy Legs, Elroy Hirsch. They got Art Monk, Fred Biletnikoff, and Charlie Joyner. So
yes, they do.
That's what is that? 11 they picked. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they picked 11 receivers. There's 3 of them that I don't have on my list, but then again, we're going back to 1999 here. I don't have Art Monk on my list. I don't have Fred Biletnikoff, and I don't have Charlie Joyner. But if I were to go back to 1999, I might, going back 23 years, I probably would have Fred Biletnikoff on there. And maybe Don Maynard, too.
He was, yes. Yeah, that's a good point. He was tremendous. I watched something this week on, I watched several because I knew we were going to do the show. So, I watched one on Hirsch because I didn't see a lot on him, Crazy Legs. And I guess there was something wrong with his legs, kind of the way they moved. That's how he got the nickname. But they said he was tremendous. He doesn't have the accolades that some of these other guys have, but it was a complete, I think it was when did he start? In the late 40s?
I think
it was 48, 49 when he started.
Probably mostly the 50s he played. Mostly the 1950s.
He was yes, exactly. Mostly the 50s, that's right. But he was a very popular guy. They said he was very good looking, and he had like a lot of star appeal.
Right.
And, he was almost, I guess, he was like Namath before Namath. Like he just had that kind of, he was in the right place at the right time.
Yep.
But I did watch another one, Mark, on Raymond Berry, and they said he had the greatest hands. So everybody in this video that talked about Raymond Berry talked about his hands.
Right.
And the way he could run routes. That's how he was just a great route runner.
Right.
And I was looking at that 2010 list, and I wanted to see who they took off from the 1999 list. I'm not sure if Charlie Joyner was in the 2010 list. I don't think he is.
Let's see. I have it here somewhere.
When they did that one in 2010. They have it in alphabetical order, and I was looking for it here, and I didn't see him.
The 2010 list only has 8 receivers. Yeah, so Joyner's not on there. Yep,
Joyner's not on there, but Michael Irvin is on there.
Irvin, yeah, the names changed quite a bit on the 2010 list. Irvin is on there.
Yes. And Art Monk is gone, Mark.
Yeah, yep. Monk is gone. Bolitnikov's gone. Charlie Taylor is gone. They put Randy Moss on the 2010 list. Yeah, so
you got to put him on there. You got to put Moss in there, though.
I wouldn't have him. I wouldn't have him in my my own. Well, it's my own personal opinion. I wouldn't have him. I wouldn't want him on my team just because of the attitude problem. You know, such a.
No, I get that, but based on just on production alone, he was right up there with. Unfortunately, Terrell Owens is another guy I wouldn't want to have, but Terrell Owens retired. He was second to everything. He was second only to Jerry Rice, and I think just about every stat. He was that, people forget about that because he was so disruptive. But he really was great.
Well, they certainly had the talent.
I did watch something on Don Hudson where Peter King talked. Peter King claims that Don Hudson may be the greatest receiver ever. Not only that, he went as far as to say he may be the greatest football player ever, Don Hudson.
Yeah. I don't know how you determine.
He went that far.
I don't know how you determine who's the greatest football player ever, unless you can play every position on the field. Because it's much different. Baseball, although they each play a position, they all have a common denominator. They have to get up to bat. They all have to get up to bat. In football, everybody's playing a different position. So how can you determine who's the greatest player ever? There's really no.
When I watched that video, Mark, I came away with how people think about Babe Ruth. Like, in other words, like this Don Hudson, the way he was talking about, was so far ahead of his time.
Right.
Like that. Like they talk about Babe Ruth. People go, oh, today he wouldn't be. The guy was half drunk. You hear all these things. But the guy was so far ahead of his time. That's the way he was making it, that he's claiming, you could go as far as to say this. And he said that at the end. He could be the greatest football player. And I was like, you don't really realize it until you look at the guy was playing in an era where passing was, and he was setting, he had tremendous records, so head and shoulders above, and nobody else was even close.
That's right. That is.
Yeah, I know that his touchdown record held up until he played in the 30s, 40s, I think it was, and his touchdown record held up until Steve Largent. What was it? The Seahawks that he played for?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it was like a 50-year span or something like that it held up for. But still, yeah, to your point, Dave, it was not even close. I mean, I'm not here to say who was the greatest of all time because, like Mark said, that's a near impossible task. But from a innovative pioneer type of his records would, you would take 7 other teams in the league for their passing stats combined, and he'd still beat them single-handedly, their entire passing stats. It was
absolutely.
It wasn't even close.
Realize it. That was one of the good things, Mark, about that list in 2010. They made a video for every guy on there.
Right.
I don't know if they did that for the 2019 thing, the NFL. I think they did. But the 2010 one, for some reason or another, I have more vivid things of it. And I watched quite a few of them this week. And Largent is another guy that's gone on the 2010 list, by the way, on this list here. So in 99, he's on the list, and in 2010, he's gone, Largent.
2010.
Yep, he was great.
Largent, yeah, I got to put Largent. I got to have Largent on my team.
He's not on there for some reason. But like you said, they added guys, Mark.
Yeah, we're going to run into that with offense more than defense, I think, because the game changed so much more from most of the offensive schemes, whereas the defense was somewhat similar.
It'd probably be a lot
No,
different.
it's exactly right. He's right. Like you said last week, Mark, or when we did it 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, you brought it up. All these more guys on offense than D. That was the first thing you said, because I listened to our thing the other night, and you said, there's a lot more guys that handle the ball on these lists than there are defensive players.
Oh, yeah, especially running back and quarterback.
Yes.
At tight end, they only have 4 guys. The 1999 list, that's the Sporting News, they only have 4 tight ends.
Yes.
They have John Mackey, Kellen Winslow. Actually, they only have 3 tight ends. John Mackey, Kellen Winslow,
right, and Mike Ditka.
Mike Ditka. They don't even have Jackie Smith on here.
When I look at this list from 99, Mark, I had to go back and revisit Kellen Winslow, because even though we watched him, he was from kind of our era.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he was. I don't know if I was questioning whether I would put him on the all-time 100, as one of the 100 greatest players. But he went from I guess he elevated. He was kind of like Bob Hayes.
Yeah,
he kind of changed the game for tight ends. He was the first one that really. I mean, Ditka was a good receiver, and John Mackey was tremendous, but it wasn't really the receiving that they were kind of known for. It was both. They blocked. They were all around, but Winslow took it to a different level, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
So I would think you got to put him on there. I was actually questioning it, but I think that you do.
Yeah, I think so.
And since then.
Oh, yeah.
Since then, look at the guys they've added onto this new list, the latest list of 2019. I think they put Gronkowski in there, didn't they?
2019? Yeah, I think they did.
Yes.
I do not have him on my list simply because he seemed like he was constantly injured. Gronkowski.
No, I follow you.
Yeah.
He was an addition. He was really the only tight end. Actually, this sounds crazy, but looking at this list now, I just realized that in 2010 there was no Largent, and in 2019 he's back on the list. He's back on there in 2019, I believe.
Well, you had different people voting, right? 2010 was the NFL Network. NFL Network was 2010. Let's see. Let's go to the offensive line. We have at guard. They picked. This is again. We're still on the 1999 list. We have at guard. They have John Hanna. They have Jim Parker, who actually played guard and tackle. Jim Parker played both. We have Gene Upshaw and Larry Little.
Just 4, right, Mark?
Yep, they only picked 4 guards. And they picked, I think, about 20 running backs. 19 quarterback and 4 guards.
See, that's something too where even before the era of TV, I mean, in the, say the internet where you can see every camera angle, back in the day,
that's right.
They never would. The only time your name was ever talked about if you're a lineman is if you let up a sack or something like that. So you didn't have like this whole you didn't have these stats for pancakes or the PFF grades or any of those things. It'd be kind of cool to see they have this, it's called PFF grade for the linemen, all players nowadays. But I wish they could go back and do that individually for every player across time, even though that's impossible because there's not footage back in the day.
That's a good point, Arnie.
Yeah, I agree, Arnie.
And I think John Madden had a lot to do with the, bringing publicity to the offensive line.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. Yeah. When the Giants were in there, he had his favorite players. And then through the 90s, he loved some of those Redskins. And when the Cowboys became popular, he loved Nate Newton and he loved Larry. He loved Eric Williams. Madden picked up on a lot of things. I mean, he made a lot of players, believe it or not. I think he made Brett Favre. We'll get to that when we talk about the quarterbacks. But Madden had a lot to do with a lot of stuff, believe me. More than people even know or give him credit for, you know?
That's right, because people listen to Madden. People listen to Madden.
I'm looking to see as these lists evolved, Mark, that if those 4 guards were still on there. I'm looking at them now. Because you said there was... well, we know that John Hanna's on there. He might be the greatest guard of all time, Mark.
A lot of people say so.
Not a lot of people now say that Larry Allen could have been the greatest. He was a great athlete, Larry Allen. He ran guys down. He was supposedly bench pressed the crazy amounts of weight, but he was a tremendous player. But I still think John Hanna's right up there. As if you, like you were saying the last week, if you had to pick one or two, if you had to pick your 2 guards for a starting team, I mean, who would they be?
Well, I got to go with Hanna and Jim Parker. I think Hanna and Jim Parker.
Yeah. Lilly said that Parker was the toughest he ever went against.
I do remember that. Absolutely. He was one of the few guys, maybe the only guy, that could block Lilly one-on-one. Now, if Lilly
Jim Parker, he said, was very tough.
Yeah. Now, that's saying something. If that's coming from Bob Lilly, paying a compliment like that, then you know Jim Parker. And he could play tackle, too. He played, I think he made All-Pro at both positions, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right.
Wow.
That's where Lilly said he had the toughest time against him, because Lilly said that he was, early on, Lilly, was a defensive end. And he wasn't really a defensive end. He was just coming up. He was green. And he said he couldn't get by Parker for nothing, he said. And then I guess there was a game they played, and Parker came up to him afterwards, and he said, I just want to, put my hand on you. He touched him. And he said, that was the first time I touched you all day. Lilly said he was going right by him. But Lilly said, he was getting up there in years.
Right.
But he said he was just a tremendous... Don't forget, they were blocking like this back then with the arms tucked in.
Yep,
it wasn't like these guys today. It was a lot... Those old guys on the offensive line were tremendous.
That's right.
Tremendous, because think of what they're getting away with now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, not only do they get a guy, but now you can actually grab a guy as long as it's in here.
Right.
It doesn't extend outside onto the arms, the shoulder pads. This is the stuff that's going on now. And the tackles are actually offset. They're not even really on the line of scrimmage. They're like a step back almost.
Right. Yeah, and they can't even open their hands back then. They couldn't open their hands.
No.
And holding was a 15-yard...
it was like the electric football.
Yeah, yep.
Right.
And holding was a 15-yard penalty. All right.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Hey, Mark, how many of all these lists, when they did create them, how often did they get the players involved? Or was it mostly just reporters and other people that are
Dave has
voting for these?
Information from that book, right, Dave? I'm
not sure if the players were involved. They interviewed players, like in that book that I told you about.
Yeah.
There were interviews with players, but they weren't involved in the picking. The Sporting News book were 12 editors of Sporting News.
Okay.
I think the NFL Films one from 2010, I think that was a little more, I think, of player involvement. I'll be honest with you.
2010?
Yep,
how about...
I think so.
Because I know nowadays, every year when they put out the NFL, they have the as voted by the NFL players, like the top 100 in the like current in the league.
Yes.
So especially when it comes to offensive, defensive linemen or something where you don't have as many stats, it's like you kind of, I would think you'd put more weight in those. Like you said, Lilly said this was the best guard I ever played against versus just some random guy on the sidelines watching them.
No, really, it was 137. I got to tell you, I looked some of these ones up, Mark, and I made a point to find stuff on the guards and tackles. But Larry Little had a list of offensive guards that I admire of the 10, and he had Gene Upshaw number 1. Gene Upshaw number 1. This was Larry Little's list now. Just what Arnie's talking about. Players talking about other players.
Right.
And it's number 2, he had John Hanna. We just talked about him.
Yep.
And then at 3, he had Fuzzy Thurston. How about that?
Oh,
Fuzzy
wow.
Thurston from the Packers.
Yeah, he doesn't really get that.
And then he has Larry Allen at number.
I never even heard of that
Yeah,
name.
Oh
played
yes,
with
Larry
Jerry-
Allen at number 4. Mark, how about that? A more modern player.
Right.
And then you'll be familiar at number 5. You had Randall McDaniel. At number 6, a guy you'll be familiar with, Tom Mack. He was very good.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Tom Mack with the Rams?
Yep. Made a lot of all-pros, Tom Mack.
He got interviewed in that Lilly interview where they talked about Lilly, and he said Tom Mack said Lilly was the best of the best. And right in the beginning of that special that they had on Lilly, he comes right out and says that Mack does. He had Reggie McKenzie in there at number 7. Larry Little, Joe Jacoby,
right?
Jerry Kramer at number 9, and Nate Newton at number 10.
Wow.
How about that?
Wow,
This is Larry Little.
10 of them. Wow.
Yes.
Well, I'd have Larry Little.
How about that?
I would definitely.
See, now Larry Little, I just looked at that list. He's not on the 2010. Imagine that.
He's got to be on there.
They had a great offensive line. You thought it was one of the best offensive lines ever, didn't you?
I think it might have been the best. That running game that they had from around 1971 to 1970. That may have it probably only lasted about 4 years, but during those 4 years they virtually hardly even had to pass the ball. They just kept running and running and running, and that offensive line would just. Remember what they did to the Vikings in that Super Bowl. I think Bob Greasy passed the ball about 7 times the whole game.
I think it was 8 attempts.
Yep.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, you want to move to offensive tackle? They've got Anthony Munoz. They've got Forrest Gregg. Art Shell, Roosevelt Brown, and they have Lou Groza, but I think, they put him in there as a combo because he was one of the better kickers too. So I think they probably put him in the top 100 because he played tackle and kicker.
Yes.
What era was that from?
Mainly, I think, like late 40s through the 1950s. He played a long time. I think he played about 16, 17 years. But, by the end of his career, he was just kicking.
Was he in the, did he play in the All-American Conference or no?
I'm pretty sure he did. Yep. So
he was playing. I'm going to look him up. He don't forget he played with the Browns, and they were big time back then.
Oh yeah, in the 50s, the Browns.
They were they were the team. Them and then Paul Brown was he was very innovative. Probably one of the most innovative coaches, and maybe the most actually. But he did. You're right, Mark. He came in 46. And he played until 1967. Tremendous.
Holy mackerels. I didn't know he played.
Right.
That's
Imagine
over 20 years. Yep.
Yeah, entire career with Cleveland. How about that?
Yep.
9-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro. Lou Groza.
Yeah.
Lou Groza, tremendous.
I'm not sure. I'm not. Does it say how many All-Pros he made just as an offensive tackle? But I guess he was kicking the whole time, right? I think he was kicking.
As an offensive, yeah.
His entire career, he kicked. So,
he did, right?
Yeah.
Field goals attempted, field goals made. Oh, they didn't really kick a lot. His highest year was 26. I see it. 33 field goals attempted. He made 22 out of 33 in 1964, 66%.
Yep.
His best percentage was 88%. in 1953. 23 out of 26. That's like a modern kicker of today. Those are their stats, you know?
Yeah.
He was a big guy, too. The guy's kicking field. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to be big to play offensive tackle.
They don't break it down by that. I can't say. If I spent more time, I could probably find it. But there was a list here by Art Shell, once again, and he picks his favorite tackles. It says the best offensive tackles he's ever seen. And at number 1, he's got Jim Parker. We just talked about it.
Yep.
Parker, number 1. He had Bob Brown. Remember Bob Brown? He was nasty.
Yep.
He was a mean guy. He was like Eric Williams. In fact, if you look up meanest offensive lineman, there's a video on YouTube.
Yeah.
Eric Williams is at number 1. Eric Williams, if he didn't get hurt in that car accident for the Cowboys in '94, he was easily on his way to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That guy was nasty. That guy, I watched the 93 49er game the other day. It was a regular season game before the playoffs. He was headbutting. He was sending guys, it's not an exaggeration, 2-3 yards backwards. He was hitting them with his head. Yeah. That's how bad he was. They were actually almost like they were dizzy, and they were turning around, and they would regain their. But he was. And Madden loved it. You got to hear Madden in those games. He was going, and he really, really, really did a number on Reggie White every time he played him. Reggie White. Oh, he's considered maybe the greatest of that. They always say that. Let me tell you something. Eric Williams, he didn't just beat him. He dominated. Like Aikman said, it wasn't good enough for him to just beat a guy. He had to drive you into the ground. And I mean, he was really, really, he was something else. But they got Bob Brown, who was in that list. He's number 2 on that video about the nastiest offensive lineman. He's on this list by Art Shell with Anthony Munoz at number 3. And here's a guy you'll remember, Winston Hill, Mark. He's at number 4.
Yeah. Yep.
Remember Winston Hill from the Jets?
The Jets, yep. He was on that Super Bowl team. Yep, big Winston Hill.
I did watch a thing on on Forrest Gregg the other night.
Oh.
And I forgot who narrated it, but they said Forrest Gregg technically was the best offensive tackle that ever played. Technically sound.
Yeah.
You couldn't beat him. I'd have to go back and rewatch it, but it was a player that was talking about it.
Right.
He was saying he was unbelievable, way ahead of his time.
Vince Lombardi said the same. You know how Tom Landry always says that Bob Lilly was the best player he ever coached. Vince Lombardi says the same thing about Forrest Gregg. Vince Lombardi said Forrest Gregg was the best football player I ever coached. So that's saying something. Coming from Vince Lombardi.
Think of all the guys he coached.
Yep.
They got Rayfield Wright at number 6 on this list, by the way, Mark. Art Shell. And then here's a guy you'll remember, Jim Tyre.
Oh, yeah.
From the Chiefs.
He's the one that killed his wife, right? Is that it?
Then he killed himself, I think.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. How awful.
Yep. And he's got Deerdorf, Willie Rofe, and Roosevelt Brown to finish up his list of 10. But that's Art Shell. That was his list.
Yep. At center, they only picked, what did they pick? Only 3?
Imagine that.
They picked Mel Hine. Maybe they picked 4. Mel Hine, Mike Webster, Jim Otto.
Yeah.
Did they pick Dwight Stevenson? I think they picked Dwight Stevenson as a 4th.
I think he's in the book, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Let's see, what are we missing now?
Jim Otto was tremendous. Look, I just watched. How many games did he play? I'm going to look it up because
he held the record.
Something about. Did he?
Yeah, at one point he held the record for most consecutive starts.
Some crazy amount of games, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. Jim Otto, he was 210 straight games. I don't think he missed a game.
Nope. Yep, he held the record at the
That's
time.
unbelievable. 1960 to 1974. 14 years.
Yeah, that's actually
Yeah, I'm looking
15.
at it right now. Games played, games started. Never missed a single game. Imagine this.
Yeah. Yeah, he was tremendous. Jim Otto.
You know, one thing I didn't know about Jim Otto, he was 00. Everybody knows that.
Right.
But his first year with the Raiders, he was number 50.
Oh.
I didn't know that until I watched a couple things.
Oh, I don't
about
remember.
that?
I don't remember that. No. I didn't know he was number 50.
He was tremendous, Jim Otto. You know, and Mike Webster was tremendous too. Mike Webster and that whole Steeler offensive line in the 70s, when they came out, probably by 76, maybe 77, you could see that there was an actual physical change to these guys. They were doing something. Okay, like Tony Dorsett said,
right?
I don't know what these guys are taking, but we need to get some of that. Okay? You could see it physically, their appearance, their arm. They had the cut off. Remember Mike Webster wore the short sleeve shirts?
Yep, no matter what the temperature was.
You never saw guys that looked that way before.
No.
You know what I mean? That was the beginning of that era of whatever they were taking. I don't know what they were taking, but they were definitely taking something.
Yeah.
Joe Green told a story about Mike Webster where he said that L.C. Greenwood or Ernie Holmes was rushing over him.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it was this one particular year, and he said to Joe Green, I don't know, I can't move him. And Joe Green said, well, he can't improve that much. He said, let me take a shot at him.
Yeah.
He goes, and I was rushing over, and he goes, I couldn't move him.
Yeah.
This was Mark, all of a sudden, out of the blue, from one year to the next.
Yeah.
And then he was like that the rest of his career.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was a great player, Mike Webster.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it.
And it ended up tragically for him. Wasn't he living out of his car at the end?
Yep. That's what that movie
Terrible.
they made. What was the name of that movie? I think it was just called Concussion. And the movie was a lot of them. Yep.
Yep.
A lot of the movie was about him. Yep.
He was living out of his car. Imagine this.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Tragic.
I was looking to see if there was a list on centers. But no, the only one I could find was the overall offensive lineman selected by Gene Upshaw. I think who's Ken Lanier, Mark? Do you know? Familiar with him?
No.
Ken Lanier. He's on this list.
Ken Lanier. I'm not familiar with that name.
Yeah, he's got Bob Brown. He's got Jim Otto at number 8. Okay, I think he's got Larry Little at 5. I know you love Larry Little. And here's a couple of guys we didn't talk about that were really great. He's got Ron Mix. Mix at number 9. And he's got Bob St. Clair at number 10.
Right. Played for the 49ers, right?
How about that?
St. Clair, yep.
Yes, he said he got his teeth knocked out on one play because he remembers he was looking on the ground for his teeth. And they were saying, no, Bob, come on, get back into the huddle. This is what was going on. So,
forget about your teeth.
He tells that story on one of those NFL films, Bob St. Clair. He got into the Hall of Fame. I was there for that because that was when the year Landry got in. And Bob St. Clair got in that same day. I remember him telling that story at the Hall of Fame.
Right. All right. I think we got we went over everything except running back and quarterback.
If you had to pick your 5 linemen, Mark, who would they be?
Oh, without taking into account just 5 linemen. Wow. I would go with I'd have to go with John Hanna. I'd have to have Jim Parker. Definitely Forrest Gregg. That's 3. Anthony Munoz probably. And at center, you don't really hear, like Arnie said, back then there isn't that much. How you going to find footage on Mel Hein, But he was...
No, exactly.
He was the best center of his era without question. You ask any of those old football historians, and they'll tell you Mel Hein was the dominant center of his time.
He's on the 2010 list.
Yep. Yeah,
he's still on this one here.
That's right. Mel Hein.
Did he make 20? I think he's still on the 2019 list.
He very well may be.
I think he is, Mark.
Let's see.
Imagine that.
Yep, he is. He is.
Yeah, I want to say Mel Hein was also inducted to the Football and Baseball Hall of Fame.
Baseball Hall of Fame?
Yeah, but not for what you'd think. I'd have to go back and look at it. Because he was an umpire.
Oh, really?
I'm trying to find it. I would think it was Mel Hein. I'm trying to find the Mel Hein Baseball Hall, and I could have it mixed up. It was a center who I know was Pro Football Hall of Fame, but it was also baseball. For some reason, I feel like that was him. I'll look it up and I'll get it for you.
Don't remember hearing about that.
Imagine that.
I don't remember hearing about
Holy
that.
Moses.
Wow.
You know who got added to that list, by the way, for offensive linemen in 2019? That latest list, there was a couple guys, but one of them was Walter Jones. He played for the Seahawks.
Right, yeah.
He's on that 2019 list.
Yeah, he was very good. How many, does it say how many All-Pros he made? Or Pro Bowls?
Yeah, Walter Jones, he was good. And I think, and Randall McDaniel is on the list also. Those are the two newer guys on the 2019 list for offensive linemen.
Right. McDaniel. Oh, he was guard.
I was wrong, gentlemen.
Okay. Who was it? Who was it that?
Yeah, but there was a guy who, it was an offensive tackle who played. He was a Cal Hubbard. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
He's on the list, Arnie.
He made.
Believe it or not.
List.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
He is on the list.
He's on the 2019 list.
Yep. As an offensive tackle.
I think part of the reason why 2019 list has more of the old timers is because that's when they were really publicizing the 100th anniversary of the NFL. So that's why we get some of those older guys like Cal Hubbard, and he's the only person. So right here, the only man ever enshrined in both the Pro Football and Baseball Hall of Fame. And in baseball, it was because he was a umpire, and then I think there was some other things that he did there as well.
Well, good research there, Arnie.
While we're talking about that list of 2019, let me just throw this in. There was like three guys that I was not familiar at all with. One of them was Dutch Clark. Another guy was Danny Fortman. And another guy was Bill Hewitt. And I looked them all up. And they had all fairly short careers compared to, but like Arnie said, they got to, I don't know. I mean, one of the guys had a 7-year career, and he was like all pro, 5 of them. It might have been Dan Fortman. I'd have to look him up again, but those guys were added in because you were talking about, like you said, the 100 greatest. They were talking about the history, and then they added in 6 more special teams guys. But when we get to that list, I'm going to tell you, a lot of great guys were knocked off the list for those guys. And I'll talk about it when we get to it. But to your thing about Walter Jones, Mark, he played from 97 to 2008. First team All-Pro 4 times, 9 Pro Bowls.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
He was that's pretty good. I mean, he played what, a third of his career, All-Pro, and 9 out of 11 years in the Pro Bowl.
Yep. That's pretty impressive.
So he was pretty dominant,
They got, the 1999 Sporting News list. They have 17 running backs. I think that's way too many. That's way too many. I got to cut out. I got to cut out at least 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would narrow it down to 11. They got Jim Brown. They got Walter Payton. They got Barry Sanders, Gale Sayers, O.J. Simpson, Marion Motley, Earl Campbell, Bronco Nagurski, Eric Dickerson, Tony Dorsett, Emmett Smith, Marcus Allen, Lenny Moore, Steve Van Buren, Red Grange, Franco Harris, and Jim Thorpe. I think that's way too many running backs. I would take off...
Well, I can tell you who got removed. I can tell you who got removed, Mark, from that 2010 on the 2010 list was Marcus Allen got excommunicated, Dorsett got knocked out, Marshall Faulk got knocked out, Tomlinson got knocked out, and Jim Thorpe, believe it or not, and Red Grange both got knocked out of the 2010. I don't know if you could take Jim Thorpe out of that list. He was supposed to be absolutely phenomenal.
Arnie talked about it, that really once he joined the NFL, he was already in his 30s, right, Arnie? Weren't you mentioning
Yeah, I don't know
that?
exactly if it was... He was already quite into his prime for sure, yeah, because he played with Canton Bulldogs for many years, or multiple years before they even got the NFL going.
Right. Yeah, so... I don't know if I would put. He
was a phenomenal athlete, wasn't he? A decathlete, and the guy was
did everything. He did everything.
Well, think about it this way. So, in the 1912 Sweden Olympics, that's when they called him the greatest athlete of all time. You know, the Swedish king. It's famous. You know, Mr. Thorpe, you're the greatest athlete of all time, and. So that's 1912. The NFL didn't start till 1920. So you're talking 8 years alone right there.
Yep.
I mean, so he was already past his prime, but he did play into his 40s. But it was more of like a kicker, and he did play some other things too.
Right. There's a picture.
I guess he was a champion billiards player, and he was a tremendous ballroom dancer. They claim.
Really.
Yep, he was all that. He was definitely just an all around and. You know, I have a special spot for Jim Thorpe just because of like what he meant to the beginning of the league, whether it was the greatest athlete or not.
Right.
I told you about that guy that lived down the street.
Oh yeah.
Who played against him. Remember I told you about Eddie Keenan? Right. We used to see him. He was on our paper route. His sister was over there. That's a true story. He talked about Thorpe and he talked about Red Grange, both of them.
Wow. Unbelievable.
This guy played for the Hartford Blues, or you could look it up. I think it was 22 or somewhere around there. I can't remember, but I talked about him. I think the first time I was ever on that this guy was, living. He was just large, and we were like, look at this guy. Like we were like 13, 14. We were into football though. Like me and my buddies were into football pretty big time, and he started. We weren't getting the gravity of it though. He was talking. We knew he was a big guy. We knew he was talking. He played pro football. Like we weren't really getting it. We were too young to really get it. But that's right. And we didn't understand. We're like, the sister. Oh, that's why his name isn't Grady. She had the G on the front door, but his name was Eddie Keenan. And there's a picture. I just recently found the picture of that whole team. That at Hartford. It's amazing what's out there when you start looking for stuff. It really is. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Let's see. They got quarterbacks here. I think they.
Mark, you kind of try to move on without giving us your running backs. If you could only pick the 4.
If I could only pick 4? Oh, I don't know if I could.
I think that's what you've been going with this.
If I had
or should we make a pick 3?
If I had
you gotta have. Who are they, Mark?
Oh boy! If I had a 11-man, if I had to pick just an 11-man roster.
I guess we ran out of time there, football history fan. Suppose you're going to have to check in next week to listen to what Mark's going to pick for his top running backs. Then we'll dive into part 2 of the top 100 NFL list with Mark, Dave, and yours truly, the football history dude. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone. But remember, dude, I'm through if you're through.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football History Dude. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice and head on over to thefootballhistorydude.com for the show notes and more information on the history of the NFL. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.